Oh, this is gonna be a good day.
Bath
This is gonna be
bagels.
great.
Welcome to the Bath Bagels talk.
Bath bagels, Bath and bagels.
Honestly,
Isn't there a brand in America called Bath and something?
Bed Bath and Beyond.
That one.
Also Bath and Body
Don't
Works.
forget Bath and Body Works.
Bath and Body Works too.
Not to be confused with the Body Shop.
we like our bees.
Copyrighted, insert logo, whatever.
Yeah. Honestly, we didn't get flagged for this.
Awesome, cool. Well, we are at 10 o'clock, top of the hour. I guess that's the thing people still say, even though we have digital clocks. Now, welcome everybody, welcome attendees, welcome panelists. Good morning, good evening, whatever your time zone is. I hope you are having a good life. I'm Brian Prince. Welcome to Obsidian Gathering Day 2, talk number 3. Very excited to be here. If you were here yesterday, thank you for tuning in. If this is your first day, welcome. We had fantastic talks yesterday, and I just left totally drained in the best way, with a lot to think about, and I had to just lay down for a minute and be like, the universe. And today I am expecting just as good, because I have some quality people here and I'm very excited to share thoughts and experiences. So today's talk is the Intersectional Diversity talk about parkour spaces, about race and parkour and intersectionality. And before we launched the chat today, we just kind of were getting into the nitty gritty of what we were going to talk about. And the question came up, what even is intersectionality? Which I don't want to try to come off as someone who's obviously, because to be honest, I didn't even really know what it meant until last year, because during a lot of the race discussions on the internet, that word started flying across my screens very often. And so I just wanted to start off with reading a quick definition of intersectionality, which is intersectionality is an analytical framework for understanding how aspects of a person's social and political identities combine to create different modes of discrimination and privilege. Example of these aspects are gender, caste, sex, race, class, sexuality, religion, disability, physical appearance, and height. Which I did not just add in the height thing for me. That's funny. I'm 6'10", in case anybody wonders why I'm laughing at that. So just to get things started, in case people weren't here yesterday, let's go ahead and do another round of introductions. I'll start with me and I'll throw it to Marquis next. My name is Brian A. Prince. I'm the facilitator of this event. I live in Seattle, Washington, and I've been doing parkour for 12 years. And that's gonna be my quick introduction. So Marquis, I'm gonna throw it to you next.
I'm Marquis Johnson, co-organizer for the event, and I have been training parkour for 8 years. And I'm just really excited to dive in today. I don't really know what to add on to that.
Absolutely.
Lou?
Hey, yeah, so just for probably ease of our conversation, because I feel like sometimes my name might be confused with Louise's name. So Lou is fine for me. So hey everyone, I'm Lou. I live in London, but I'm originally from Hong Kong. I'm part of Team Esprit Concrete, so same team as Georgia. I train art de déplacement, but also dance and circus. Trained art de déplacement most recently than the other disciplines, started 5 years ago. And yeah, I think the things that I am interested about just in general through my movement and through other things that I do is sort of searching for the self, my identity, who I am through these disciplines, who am I out of these disciplines, and what does authenticity really mean in my life. So yeah.
I'm Howard Palmer. I'm from Jamaica originally. I started parkour in Atlanta back in 2007. Ever since then, I've always been on the path, kind of like Lou, in that way of the self-expression. I became the first certified parkour coach in the Southeast region. I did a lot of work in the community, starting out just going into different cities and working with the local kids. And just trying to get them to move outside. I started the first we called it Outdoor Movement Group. And then we started, Brian and I, or in part with what the work we were doing, maybe what's that, 2012 or something, Georgia Parkour and the idea of a community. So what brought me here in relation to that work is finding your individual core, what that looks like, and being comfortable with it, and then sharing it in the community, finding grounds for it, finding support for it, so you can still be part of the diversity in your own unique way. And I'm a big representation of that. And I hope I can be that for other people. So I'll pass it to Dan.
Yo, no. Yeah, my name's Dan Dye. I'm based out of the Metro Detroit area. I've been training parkour for just over 7 years. I said this yesterday, but my anniversary for training parkour was actually earlier in this month. It was on the 8th.
Yeah.
I also am a part of an effort to make parkour more accessible here in Michigan via parks and community education. And I'm also a community organizer.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Passing it to Luis.
Here we go.
Hello, my name is Luis. Was born in Brazil, but I've been living in Lisbon for 16 years. I've been practicing parkour since 2006, which makes it 15 years in June, more or less. I'm really into community work in the community, organized some events and worked with a lot of different stuff with parkour. And I'm really excited about being here. Thank you all for inviting me and for organizing this. This is awesome. And I'm really excited to learn, because for me, today is an opportunity to learn a lot about intersectional diversity and about the experience that everyone has to share, and how can I learn and educate myself on this topic. So yes, passing on. Let's go.
Darryl or Georgia?
I'll let Georgia go last.
That's not what I was expecting.
Right?
No, you wait.
I'm gonna let her go last. You gotta save like a powerhouse. I'm Darryl Stingley. I've been training parkour for 16 years. I am owner of Squadron and part owner of Strike Movement, leader of the legendary Squadron. We out here west side for the people. And I'm out, yeah, there you go, right there. If you see Dan's shoulder, that's that Royal Crest. I'm just a representative of anybody who needs a voice and whose experiences similar to that of mine and my people. So I'm out here to make progress and really change the game for some real shit. So that's me, and I'm gonna let it slide over to Georgia.
Hi everyone, I'm Georgia Monroe. I'm based in the UK. I work with Team Esprit Concrete along with my teammate Lou. I've been training Art de Déplacement for, I think it's 9 years now. I started when I was in high school. I'd say the main things that my training brings to me, or what I've been trying to work on through my training and with my team, is self-care, self-love, and also around vulnerability and finding empowerment in vulnerability. I tend to, I do coaching, I do performance work as well, and stunt work here. And today, I'm quite nervous about this session. I talked to Lou before, because, and I mentioned a little bit in the session yesterday, race isn't something I've really brought up much or talked about much for me. My heritage, my ethnicity, I'm half Jamaican, my father's side from Trelawney, and I'm English half, with my mother's side from Lincolnshire. So today is, I'm very happy to be in this space right now, and also nervous because I feel it's going to be a space where it would be amazing to listen to different people about what's it called? See, I'm really bad with these words. Diversity and race and how that comes into it, and hear different people's experiences, and try to learn a bit more about this and actually join a conversation about something that I feel I haven't really explored before. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for your honesty and vulnerability. I am also very nervous. I am like, I'm extremely nervous. Well, I always am doing these, like any kind of public speaking, even though I love it. But it's just something about getting in front of any size amount of people and just kind of choosing to be like, oh, hey, this is, there's something about that that's very nerve-wracking. And so I think the way I want to start off today's chat is, I guess my aim with this one, I don't really have like an agenda as much as I just wanted to get a bunch of people together and sharing to see where it goes. But I kind of wanted to create a panel, like we're already doing this with the event, but I wanted to create a panel of diverse representation. Aside from parkour, I do a lot of like illustration and storytelling, and like I went to school for comics. Actually, it was kind of like comics Hogwarts. It was unreal. But one thing we talked a lot about in school, it was just how much representation matters. I think a lot of people don't understand just how much it does, especially in a world like the one we live in, where like Netflix and like the idea of Netflix itself is so just like, we all understand this idea that we watch movies, we watch TV, we read books, we consume media, and there's something about being able to see yourself in that media that truly matters. Like, especially when you're a kid and you see yourself in Black Panther and you're like, wow, oh, that's me, I could be king, and like that idea really spreads. And so for me, 12 years in parkour, I felt like for the longest time, it just kind of felt like this, like, at least from my American experience, it just felt like the straight boys club. And a lot of times I just assumed like that's what it was. For the longest time, I thought I was part of that group. And then over time, like a lot of people said, we're exploring the self. I definitely had some self-exploration, learned that I'm not as straight as I thought I was. For me, it was actually kind of a funny story, because it was while I was working on The Predator in 2017, and I think it was like the first time in my life where I felt like all of my needs were met. And so like I'm like working on this movie and I have this part and I'm like getting paid decent money and I'm just chilling and I'm just like, I am bored and alone. and it was really interesting because I was like, what's up with that? So for like the first time, I felt like I could stop focusing on just like grinding and trying to get better and succeed. And I just started dating. And that turned into a whole crazy experience where eventually I just started broadening my horizons, and then I started thinking about dating men. For me, it started off kind of funny, like, oh, interesting, haha, this would be a fun time. And then like over the next year, it ended up being a lot more of like there was a lot more there. Like there was a lot more like, what does this mean? Like, who am I? Like, and this is where I feel like the intersectionality conversation comes in. I think for me, it felt like I was living in this world where it was a world of or, and it wasn't a world of and. So it was a world of like, I'm either this, or I'm this, or I'm this, or I'm this, or I'm this. And where I'm at now these days is it's like, whoever the fuck I want to be. And it's a lot of those things coming together. I'm the guy that, like, I don't know, like I have queer friends that are like, you don't seem queer. And I'm like, cool. I don't know.
It's funny that you say that, Brian.
Why is that?
Because well, what you're saying about your friends saying that you don't seem queer, because in all honesty, and I don't think we've ever shared this, so in hopes it finds a good place for everyone and even for ourselves.
Yeah.
When you and I used to train together, even in the beginning, you remember Cody,
Yeah.
between you, Cody, and one other gentleman, I knew there was something else going on in how you felt about men going on.
Yeah.
And even about yourself. I've talked to Cody about it, just like, hey man, how you been? What's going on? Because I had a friend that initially started transitioning into the person he wanted to become. And I was always supportive of it, again, from my background of feeling that I was never a part of something. So to hear you say that, you broaden your horizon and consider these things, even while we were training, I saw that in you, man. I saw you wanted that space or that conversation or that opportunity to feel comfortable to talk about it or be that person. Again, we're in the South, we're in the Bible Belt, so there's not a lot of conversations around it. Even when Cody Robinson, you know, in his part of his world, dudes didn't like when we took shirts off. It was a thing not to take your shirt off to train, as hot as it is, you know, and it's like, why not? Well, we're just uncomfortable with what? You know, so I love that you have that strength now, because I was a bystander or somebody side by, especially being as old as I am or was, you know, I was just an adult in that way, watching you grow up. And so I really want to take this second to clap you up for it, you know, speaking on your space, because again, I could tell, and it was difficult. And I don't know, hanging out with the people that we were with, because we had separate groups together as friends, you know, we only had like 2 people that we could both call friends together. So proud of you, bro. Proud of you.
Thanks, man. That means a lot. Yeah. It's scary because it's not like, I don't know. I think that's a big thing I'm trying to advocate more in the space, is like giving people space to think and explore and feel, because I don't think I had that. There was definitely like a lot of fear of like, and this is where it kind of comes back to the parkour space, is like in that period of learning who I was, I think the thing I was the most afraid of losing like was my connection to the parkour community. Mm-hmm. And for a while I kind of just took myself out, because I just assumed I wasn't part of it anymore because of this.
Yeah.
And then I'm not sure when, but I kind of hit a point where I was like, no, fuck that. Like that's my call. And so the last like year and a half has been me like trying to put myself back out there and trying to make myself as visible as I was before or wanted to be. And so that's kind of like what I wanted to do with this talk, was to create a panel of diverse experiences and show, I guess, whoever's watching or whoever might watch in the future, that like, if you feel like you're the only person, I'm this person, I'm different, I'm separate, I'm alone, it's like, you're not. And so, yeah, I'm not sure, I don't really have a question after that story. But I would love if anyone wanted to jump in with their experience. Thank you so much for that acknowledgement. I very much appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome, man. It speaks to our environment and what we were going through. And I had guys that come up to me when I was doing parkour in Atlanta at Piedmont Park, and anybody who's familiar with that park, anywhere from Freaknik days, 92 on up to probably now, that was actually a spot where homosexuals, gay people who were exploring, they would meet up at that park, and things would happen night or day. So in all honesty, you wouldn't come to this park thinking you don't pay attention to what's going on. And there were cameras in the park, big, like technology expensive cameras, not like little small Home Depot ones. So we knew that there was still a federal or I don't know if Piedmont's federal or government, but that space was still being watched and or protected. And people got stabbed or hurt in that park. So I picked a section during the daytime that was next to the street, that if you still in this environment and felt comfortable coming out, come out to train. And the gentlemen or the men or the boys that came up to me, a lot of them did have that difficulty because it was for them just learning how to express themselves. I had multiple times being asked if whether I was homosexual or if I've ever had any kind of experience. And I started thinking that the only reason, or maybe one of the reasons is because I didn't not feel comfortable around myself. No matter what environment we were in, where we were training, or even how we were talking, I'll take my shirt off, I'll point at something, I'll say his form looks good. I wouldn't feel like I'm not being honest, or that there was something about me. It was, or about me, it was just me expressing. And one guy came up to me, he's like, your confidence is also what's attractive. You know, you're out here jumping and flipping on stuff, your shirt's off, you're sweating, you're moving, you're working with people, you're nice, you're saying hi, you're smiling. What the, you know, like, I'm like, well, what are you supposed to do? You're not supposed, you're out here training. So it also started speaking to the idea of a man. I started realizing that they were looking for their manhood in these ways of trying to identify their sexuality, and then try to figure out their position in society with that. So it became layered. And the only space I could really exist in was just being open enough to allow them to come through the train and show up any way they wanted to, dressing or doing whatever they want, and just train. And that did separate some people because they didn't feel comfortable training with them. Even though they could train with me, they couldn't train with that person. And so that, again, another layer. So it became very difficult to try to find a space to exist comfortably. And so I would train in different cities at different times with different groups. The only answer I saw in the end was when the internet came around, in the sense that we could get into a group, and the Facebook group existed. And so we could put posts as to when you want to train. So we've performed a platform that at least it became the Georgia Parkour meetup group. So people would come through and say, hey, I want to train today. Yeah, okay, meet up with this guy, boom. And it became a lot easier for everyone to find their own pocket and still grow, even if the one person who started it, or the other person who they love to train with, or the other person who started it was not there. That became a big answer for the inclusion of the diversity in the way that I experienced it, because I couldn't relate directly, but I could understand fully the being uncomfortable in your own space and wanting to find your own space to talk and breathe. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'm resonating on a few levels there, in a sense that I was thinking after yesterday, listening into the topics yesterday, was in a conversation, it's very interesting to kind of find out and identify what are the things that's about you and what's about the other person. Yeah. And often if you don't think that way, it could always lean towards one more side and then make you feel either bad or think other things. So I think it's very important to kind of be like, what is that person talking about me, or is that person talking about themselves? Right. And then that could then bring more clarity to be like, hey, the statement of like what Brian said, you receive something about you don't seem queer. Yep. And then I think that says a lot about the person, of how they understand queerness. And it's like, well, I know I am queer, then who are you to tell me I'm not queer? What gives you the right to say I'm not queer because
you're not queer enough?
Like,
hear that.
So yeah, and then a lot of emotions will come and all that. Yeah. But I think also the question of who am I, it changes every day. And to me, it's like a double-edged sword. It's like, yeah, I have all this life ahead of me to find out who I am, or to search for who I am. That's great. That's amazing. But on another day, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm not going to find out until I die or something. So that's also something that's playing on my mind every time I'm stuck or something. So, but yeah, that's just the thoughts that I have at the moment of what's been shared so far.
Yeah, actually, Lou, I think you pointed to something really powerful when you were, Brian, you as well, when you pointed to the statement around like not being queer enough, because this is honestly something that we experience as Black folks too, like kind of like this push and pull of like where you're supposed to fit inside of your own identity, right? And honestly, like if we look deep enough, we'll notice that a lot of that push and pull comes from the standards that have kind of been forced upon us, like what it means to be Black, or like what it means to be queer. I know personally, like even me getting on this call today, I was kind of like, am I even qualified to be here? I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm baby queer. Like I just came out like a month ago, not even. And I'm like, all right. But yeah, I just think it's really interesting because, you know, I didn't I came out when I like right before I turned 21, and I honestly had no.
If you identify in any which way.
Oh yeah, I identify as bisexual. And you know, I spent a long time, I guess, sitting with like the thoughts that I had, and like looking back on it, I kind of noticed things like as I was growing up. I'm like, oh yeah, Daniel, this has kind of been your thing this whole time. But I grew up not really having space to explore that. And when I was finally in a position where I like felt safe enough to explore that, there was also this question of like what are you doing? Like where do you fit? How are you supposed to behave? How are you supposed to speak? And this is a similar thing to what I felt during kind of like my dive into activism. Like as I started to like really start to pay attention to what was happening around the rest of the world, and like to Black folks specifically in this country, it was kind of like this thing of like, okay, there's a part of my identity that I've kind of like shunned away from me, you know, because I guess to give you a little more background, like I was raised in Detroit. I like grew up like in a really Black household, and also I was kind of raised inside of anti-Blackness. Like I was kind of raised to see certain facets of myself or certain ideas or behaviors as not the right kind of Black. And this created a weird social dynamic where I was like separated from my own community because I was one of them, and at the same time I was not, because of the way that I spoke or the way that I dressed or my interests and things like that. So it was like later, like I guess in 2020, when I finally decided that like, hey Daniel, like you can be Black and have all these interests, and like you're kind of like doing a disservice to yourself by being separate from this community. It was a similar feeling of when I was coming out. It was kind of like, okay, how do I fit into this space? Like, how am I supposed to behave? How am I supposed to act? But if I sit down and think about it for long enough, it's like, what does it mean to even act Black? What does it mean to act queer? It's like, these are like standards that are mostly external, that are weighing down on, you know, who we think we're supposed to be.
Right. So that's part of the intersectionality too, right?
Yeah.
Like, like your Blackness and your, let's call it like the way you speak or something. I've been told more times in my life than I can count, like, oh, you act white, or like, oh, you sound like talk white, you're not Black enough. Like, oh, go, could you go tell those Black kids to move because they're sitting at our lunch table and you're one of the nice Black kids. And I was just like, what just happened? Like, it's nuts. And yeah, there's a thing, there's like a subtle gaslighting in that, where you start taking yourself out of your own racial experience because you feel like, well, maybe my racial experience is fake or it's not enough. Yeah, and it's such a hard feeling, and I feel you on that, because when I started, like when I came out like to myself, I started being like, oh, and now there's this. It felt like a whole nother. I don't know. It felt like I had just built this huge Lego creation that I could finally like, okay, I kind of understand who I am now. And someone's like, so here's your next one. And I was like, oh my God, okay.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I have a bit of a question, I guess. I was talking about to Lou. I literally like called Lou earlier today to talk about it. But
hi again.
Well, yeah, Lou, and like I can find Lou a lot with stuff. We're quite close, so I always find it's comfortable to talk to her about things. And what you were talking about, Dan, there, just like it was literally like almost word for word the thoughts that I had in my mind I want to share. It's that, and what you were saying, Brian, about that you're not white enough, you're not Black enough, and like growing up, that was constant of just like hanging out with Black friends, but then if you hang out with white friends, you're with them, or even to relationships, like my current partner's a white man, even that is a kind of a question or a joke of, oh, you're definitely more white, or oh, why don't you go out with the Black man? Why aren't you going out with the Black man? And I think there's one thing, I guess it's still something on my mind I haven't really processed yet, but would like to bring out, is that there starts to be almost a resentment towards my Black heritage or my Black culture, because I felt all the time that, at least growing up or in the area that I was in, there wasn't really many figures in my Black community that I actually looked up to and respected.
Yeah.
Like that side, I met a lot of cousins, things like that, who I would say I didn't get along with, I didn't feel like I connected as much with. But then in school and everything, you're taught history of these great figures and from Europe and America and things like that. But in terms of Black history, I can't recall many figures, at least learning until I was older and got to like do my own reading. How many of those people can I look up to for inspiration and see that we're more than just, you know, kind of what the media has portrayed in like R&B videos and all this kind of stuff, but there's more to us. And I think I grew a bit of a resentment towards it because not only was I being judged by them for not being or one side or the other, but also I would have felt like I was missing a bit of inspiration from that side or knowing what is my culture like. So I was wondering if any of you guys as well growing up or having those kind of judgments of you of not being white enough, not being Black enough, if you ever felt some form of resentment in there or anything like that.
Oh, one of my,
Go ahead.
if you don't mind, one of my, not necessarily earlier memories, I was probably like 10, but I remember being in 5th grade and these 2 Black classmates of mine, I don't know, I wouldn't say they targeted me or anything, but I just distinctly remember there being a day where they had a newspaper and they said, "Do you know who this man is?" And I go, "No, I have no idea who this person is." And then for the rest of the year, I was ridiculed because I didn't know who Ludacris was. Yeah, so that's just the beginning of several experiences of not being Black enough because I don't listen to a type of music or don't get involved in a certain activity or anything like that. I grew up, you know, playing metalcore in high school and hosting shows and things like that and being in mosh pits and having predominantly white friends because just that small riff and interests threw me away from seeking Black friends even. I mean, I definitely have them and I have some close friends, but they also understand that I never felt part of the Black groups in school. I mean, even in college, there would be days where the Black fraternities or sororities will be stepping on the bricks and I'd be like, cool, I'll hang out here for a couple minutes, but I don't know anybody. I don't really know where this comes from. I don't understand any of it. And yeah, so I think in the South especially, it's very easy to just accept the separation and take where you're, just take where you're accepted and kind of do your own thing. But especially getting into my adulthood, I'm looking back on that stuff and I'm like, oh, wow. When I stand alone, I'm just a Black man in America. If you don't know anything about me, like I look to the next Black person in a grocery store or a gas station or anything, if anything is going to go down. So now I'm dependent on a community that unfortunately I don't feel as though I got to invest in growing up.
Yeah.
You know, what's funny, I'm hearing from Georgia's side, as well as Dan and now Marquis' side. So coming into when you're an immigrant into the country, all of those labels or all of those boxes or all of those ideas get thrown onto you. And coming in from a young age, and particularly Black people, I'll start even for Jamaicans, we don't have a space where we share our feelings. It's usually an aggressive format or usually done in a way that there's a physical attachment to it. Jamaicans like to beat their children, right? So I grew up in that household thinking physical representation of my actions or, reprimandation when that was the way. Transition that into going outside and trying to find a way to exist in my community. My hands, as much as my mouth, became a way to communicate and defend myself. Still don't even define if I'm Black, Jamaican, yellow, purple, orange, gay, none of that yet. Just still trying to exist. To Marquis's point, he highlighted something that exists in a lot of us when we just don't know where to exist within our community, within ourselves as Black. So we just hang out with the people that accept us. Sometimes we don't even accept them. They just didn't bother us. And we go back to a space where we hang out, where we're accepted by white people, whether you're the good nigga or the bad nigga that they like. It becomes like, okay, well, I'm still trying to figure out who I am, but I know over there I'm accepted this way. So am I that? And that starts defining you before you start learning who you are. And we look at a community like Parkour that we combine and we all relate to in a long way. I'm really loving that there's still not a way to define our community other than we just come together to move. what we're doing right now is trying to hopefully give it more clarity as to what the community is. When I try to be with my friends or grow up, when I was growing up, I had white friends that they would call me to hang out with them. And their parents would want to see me because I didn't have my pants sagging. Simple as that. Call Howard, come because he's nice. He, just like we're saying, he's the nicer one. And it's like, well, I want to go actually hang out with Claude because we like boxing together. Over here with Eric or Owen, we're playing video games. And then I'm like, well, Owen, they invite me to dinner. I don't get dinner at home, but Owen's family love me over there. Claude, his dad's not even home anytime. So again, I'm trying to define myself. To Georgia's point, there's no history or platform for us to know our greatness so often, as much as we find out a lot of the things that we're not, right? And spaces we don't exist in. So it's really hard at times to find our space. And I really love and speak to, and what I'm getting at in my point is that in parkour, in our way of moving, the more we come together, that intersectionality just happens. It doesn't define itself, it just happens. You know, so I can train with this person or that person. Over at Parkour's Black Equity, we have Black dudes that do whatever they want to do and dress the way they want to dress, and they get put up. Not because they're this or that, because they move and they love to move. So I think the biggest thing, what we find like separate in our communities, is that we found something that brought us together, even though we weren't defining ourselves yet, but we were being socially defined. And now we're coming into a stronger point of, okay, what does that actually mean to me? And then what does it actually look like? And I don't know if there's an answer more than it just keeps evolving on itself. Because what is the future children gonna look like when they decide what their sexuality is? Maybe they're into robots. What are you gonna do about that? You know, what kind of relationship is that?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I used to call it, well, I still call it like the no man's land. It's kind of like neither there nor that. I know I will never be able to relate completely to everyone's lives here. But my experience was I grew up in Hong Kong and I went to a school that wasn't the local system. And so that was already sort of like a different way of growing up. And so I was never really like seen as 100% from Hong Kong, even though I was born there. And then I ended up here because I enjoyed life here a little bit more. We could get into the political situation about Hong Kong another time. But it's like this no man's land of like other people not really, or like people didn't used to believe me when I said I'm from London or I'm from Hong Kong. And the question that would always like tick me off would be, where are you from? Sure. And I'm just like, what is that question? Like, so the question before that would have been, where are you from? And then kind of like, I dug deep a little bit with our mentor, Kasturi, and my reaction to the where are you from question is many emotions. The first one being like a defensive one of like, hey, I just answered your first question, so why are you asking the second question? And kind of going back to that point of like, they kind of had an answer already, or they had an answer that was different to my answer. And so it kind of makes me feel like, am I even needed in this conversation? Like, if you already have the answers, then is the asking of that more of a confirmation of their belief?
Am I aware of my label, and do I accept it?
Yeah. And I think the layers that Howard was talking about kind of magically happens when we do get together in that parkour space, in that art de déplacement space, free running space. But I feel like it's like this unconscious, unsaid adaptability that each one of us here on the screen has had to have in their lives, those social skills, those safety skills, and those kind of people skills that somehow we've found just by our own means, just by trying to stay alive. And I think that extra people skill kind of helps the magic happen when we do train together. So I think there is sort of like credit to everyone's sort of intelligence in that way, to make the magic happen.
That is a super powerful perspective. Brian, do you want to hop in really quickly?
Yeah, there's some really powerful questions in the Q&A, and I really wanted to throw them at the panel, like while they're there.
Okay.
Sorry, cut you off. I wasn't sure if you were about to.
That's okay. I did want to piggyback off of Lou's statement really quickly, because I think
I want to hear your piggyback, and then after
cool.
Go for it.
Sick. Yeah, because I think you pointed to something that's really beautiful about intersectionality, because we kind of talk about how we exist in a certain set of power structures as people in society. And power structures reward certain traits over others. Like typically, like in the United States, whiteness is kind of like our archetype. That's our standard, right? Mm-hmm. And we all exist in different places on this spectrum, right? So we have as like a straight white man, you're in a different position in society, just like how you're viewed and the way that your life is interpreted versus like being a queer Black person, or even being someone from Hong Kong, or even being from Brazil. And like we all have these unique experiences that kind of intersect with one another based off of the power structures that we exist inside of. And I think that's like something that's really powerful for us to notice, because it allows for us to find common ground and places to stand when we are communicating with each other and interacting inside of spaces that aren't necessarily familiar for us. Because like personally, I don't know what it's like to be a woman, let alone I just don't know what that's like. But I do have parallels to that experience as a Black person and as a queer person. Like I can make connections that will not necessarily make up the difference, but they will kind of bridge the gap just enough for us to meet in the middle, so that we can like make the proper steps or do the proper adjustments to make sure that our space is like adequate for both of us. Yeah. So yeah, I just really wanted to point to that, because that's such a we have Lou here who like has a different experience than all of us, but can still relate on some level, because there are parts of our lives where our struggles intersect with one another.
Yeah, my my boyfriend's parents are from Taiwan, but he grew up in Texas. And so sometimes we just have moments where like, yeah, all right, yeah, like, but it's so funny how it's like a completely different experience, but we're both like, that thing where, yeah, okay. Thank you for that.
I think it comes down to respect, and a lot of people probably just easily forget that when the emotions come through. And it's a bit sad to know that when the emotions do come through, respect is probably the first few things that come out the window. And yeah, I think, yeah, that's a basic human thing, to kind of just keep that respect, whatever form it is. I think there's probably just lots of different types of way to respect someone. And I mean, I'm never going to learn every single type of respect in the world, but at least the intention to learn already like sets you on that journey.
Yeah. I think empathy is like scary, because it's like choosing to attempt to feel how that person feels while still acknowledging that you probably don't understand.
Yeah, and there's a difference between empathy and sympathy, and I don't think a lot of people see that.
Yeah. Or even know how to spell it.
I'm gonna jump into one of these Q&A questions. They're pretty big. We got like 2 paragraph long questions.
Okay.
So one of them is I'm wondering as well about experiences of sexism in the community. As a woman in parkour and also doing it in my mid-30s, I feel a bit ridiculous sometimes that I'm not very good yet, because I don't want people to feel women can't do parkour. I do know it's not on me and what's wrong with this, and I don't act on this thought, but I do think about it. Society's views and expectations on women's health, activity, risk-taking is quite scary, as it taints how you approach a practice. Also, I often get scared something bad will happen when joining a new community unless I can see it's not very diverse yet. And then in parentheses, it's mockery, hearing abusive, intolerant statements, sexual harassment, etc. Yes, that's the whole or statement.
Yeah.
Does
Thank you for asking. That is, I think the first step to tackle that is to ask the question, and it takes some courage to ask the question. I just wanted to say that I don't really have much initial thoughts. I just want to thank the person asking.
Yeah.
Georgia, it seems like you have something.
I connected with what you said at the beginning of this wanting to prove. I think I mentioned it last time as well. I can definitely resonate with that. When I started training, there was definitely a drive to want to prove that women can do what men could do. And the hardest thing about that is, just as we're talking here about the idea of everyone is individual, not everyone is exactly on the same base. We come from so many backgrounds, with so many upbringings, with everything down to our genetics is something unique. You can't just prove that's it. Women are better than men. We're different. We're all different. Men and women are different. Men may, just as a biological being, have certain advantages, but women may have certain advantages in other areas. But also, who was it who put the question? Sorry, or was it anonymous?
Anonymous, yeah.
Anonymous, yeah. This proving, I think, it can be really damaging for your own process in really getting to know and own who you are. Just from a personal experience, I think it made a huge block for me in terms of the anger that I felt when I couldn't do something, the resentment I felt even to my own, the people I identify with, other females. I had a big resentment for other females because not only was I putting the pressure on myself of, I need to prove this, but when I saw them doing things or relaxing, or what I perceived as them allowing men to take sympathy, I got angry at them. And I started isolating myself in that sense, rather than trying to understand or trying to find out just who are you as a person. It is a difficult road. And as Lou said, it's about asking the question. I don't think that it's going to be an overnight thing of finding out who you are, and it is a lifetime journey. But I think the question that would be better for your training or for your process, if you want it to be something that helps you grow, is just, who are you? And why does it matter that you need to prove you are better than men? What is the root of that? For me personally, it was growing up competitively with brothers and really not wanting to take the fact that not only am I scared of vulnerability, but I'm scared of the fact that I can be vulnerable in that sense as well. That made a big statement about my life. So yeah, I guess the only point I would say on that is, it is about really sitting with yourself and asking yourself, why do you feel you need to prove, compared to what else is it that you can grow from this? What makes you you?
And yeah, springing off of that, I think once there's some sort of empowerment that you can find when you kind of go on that search for yourself, but also saying a lot about the self. It's kind of like, I think going back to what Brian said, it kind of feels alone, like you're just finding yourself alone. And however normal that is, it will never be less lonely. Like there'll always be a lonely part of it. And I think that's human, and it's uncomfortable, but I think it's needed. But also, once you find a little bit more about your own identity, you also need to question the group's identity as well. Like, does the group that you want to, I think she was saying she was sort of scared about what the group would be. So I think it's important to kind of like find out what the group stands for as well. And if the group isn't who you want to hang out with, then maybe question, is that group going to help me? Am I really going to help the group? If I'm going to help the group, will the group respect that? Will they take it on? Will they even listen to me? And I was thinking, it's kind of like languages, languages as in actual languages, like I speak Cantonese and English and all those things, but there's lots of languages in other forms, and it's that accessibility as well. It goes both ways. So you can speak the group's language, but can the group speak your language? And then, yeah, I think those are quite important questions to kind of unpick what you're scared of as well.
I really like what you said as well, Lou, with the loneliness. I think, yeah, that feeling of aloneness or being in your aloneness in that space. There is also a difference between being alone and being lonely as well. And I think that's also a part of the journey, that if you are feeling lonely, is there something that you're missing in that process? Is there something that you're missing from others? If you're being alone, maybe in that aloneness, you can also find the power to know who you are, or be alone in, okay, this is me. It may not work for this group, or maybe I do need to take my alone somewhere else. But also spending time with yourself and getting to know yourself is a really important part of, I think, at least in the search of finding identity. So yeah, I just want to add that into there.
I think in my loneliness times, I didn't want to be with myself. And that's where the loneliness really came from.
Of course, I'm not like super qualified on this subject because I'm not a woman. And also I wanted to point to the person asked a question about sexism in the community. And I personally haven't experienced that sexism, but I have seen quite often men in the community who kind of have like this savior complex, and they like come in and they're like, let me teach you because you don't know anything. I've also seen in the same way, almost like this unwarranted surprise at the abilities of women in the community. It's like, yes, like it feels like it gets to a degree where like we love supporting women in their progress and their training, and also their abilities are not a surprise. Like the fact that they can do these skills is not something that we should be like baffled by, because we should recognize that women are just as capable as we are. And I have noticed that as a dynamic in our community, as well as just like, you know, the little kids on the internet that like that like to comment about the women's bodies while they're training and things like that. And like this is like, these are serious dynamics that happen that need to be recognized within our community. And also I feel that they are a symptom of issues that exist outside of the parkour community. You know, in the same way, I also connected with, you know, she says like, I know it's not on me, but also like there's this need, like this responsibility for how women are represented in parkour. And I think I could speak for a lot of the Black people in this panel when I say that there's a similar dynamic for Black folks, like almost like this need to perform, this need to meet the standard of what it means to like be Black in parkour or be a woman in parkour. And you know, I think we have a responsibility as a community to make sure that the people in our spaces are seen and like heard, and also that we take into account the other like dynamics that they're experiencing that we may not even be affected by or aware of.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, you had another point?
I was just reading the chat of there's the classic people offering to spot you.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to laugh, but I was just probably link that back to what is the person saying, and in that conversation, who is saying that? Is it the person that wants to be the protector role or the savior role, or is the person actually needing a spot because they might not rotate that quickly and might hurt themselves? So I think in a sense, I was thinking, yes, it's important to keep asking for what you need when you train or just in life, but also the other person listening to that to be like, okay, she doesn't need me right now, I will back off.
Hear the words.
Yeah, I think that's came up a lot as well, this idea, this particular thing of people asking unsolicited advice, or like giving unsolicited advice, or asking if a female needs help. And if you maybe tuning in a few months ago as well, there was a lot of talks in particular around women in parkour that came up a lot. And one of the main things that people are angry with, or people start getting riled up with, is the idea of, he was asking me for, like, why is he giving me advice? I didn't ask for it. And I can relate on that I used to get quite vexed with it. I'm like, why are you asking, why do I look like I need help? Or do I look like I need that advice? Do you know I'm a coach? Why are you giving me this advice, kind of thing? And at first it was a very aggressive reaction, because in my head, I know me, I know like, oh, okay, but I have this detail, or actually, no, I want to do this by myself. But I think when I was training a lot with EC as well, and I brought this up in training, I was actually prompted with a really, a big thought that stayed with me, which was, what as well, if they are asking you this, what is, as Lou said, what is the intention behind it? Yes, of course, there is definitely, I think there's a situation with boys being raised to be macho and saviors, and I have that very close to home with my brothers having been raised in that very much macho sense. I need to protect the women. But then at the same time, you don't know the person's story as much as they don't know yours. You don't know where they're coming from, why they asked. You don't know what knowledge they have behind them. You don't know what their intention is. So just as much as you have your own story, do you know their story as much as they know yours? And again, it goes back to that idea of asking for what you need. If you don't need it, then also remembering what are you bringing that's yourself, and what are you bringing that's the other person, before you react to those situations. Because I think a lot of the reactions I saw to that point was anger, straight away to anger. But you don't know their story too. So again, is it the appropriate reaction to get angry at them straight away, or to first of all ask, or just say, I don't need this right now, or ask them why they're giving you that advice?
Why are you here?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, why are you here?
Yeah, Luis?
Like,
I want to ask something because I struggle with this myself, because I really want to find the good balance and the right communication between being helpful or being a savior or being protective. And it's not only to men, to women, or to like someone that has less experience than me, but towards anyone. And I would like to ask people that get offended or in any way becomes is a sensible matter. How can we get into this perfect communication, the balanced communication? Because you know, like when boys are acting with the savior behavior, and people, when they are wrong, they are not wrong because they want to be wrong. They think that they are being right. So how can we create this diplomatic talk that we can help both ways? The one that is feeling overprotected, getting out of it, winning, and the one who is also being the overprotector, learning. How can we get to this perfect communication?
I think,
it's hard to answer that one.
I would say like, oh, sorry, Howard?
No, go ahead, Brian. I'm just like adding into it, because it's very hard to try to understand that sometimes you're just trying to be nice, and then, or you're a man trying to explain something, or you're just trying to find a way to communicate with someone, and you figure if we're moving together and they're jumping and you see they're missing the jump, you're like, hey, maybe if you point your toes, you know, and then before you know it, they're like, well, I didn't ask you anything about pointing my toes. And so it's pretty hard. I would say the more we find communication and openness about it. But go ahead, Brian. Go ahead, Lou. I'm just agreeing with what Lou
I'm loving what you're saying. I'm just holding it. Lou, I'm gonna let you go first, and then I'll jump in.
I've got a few things about that. I think need to be careful about the word perfect, because my connection to the word is quite like that's never going to happen. But that maybe that's just me being pessimistic, but that's me. And I was thinking what I learned as a coach with Esprit Concrete is to bring it back to the present moment, and say, if we just use that example of what Howard said, the jumping, instead of probably offering, if I'm compelled to help, maybe in my nature, my personality, I want to be a helpful person, maybe the most helpful thing is to ask, what's happening right now, and then bring it back to the present moment to kind of be on the same page, because time is what we share. And if we try to be there at the same time, then I think more progress could happen. And I had another point which might come back to me. Somebody else say something.
Yeah, I wanted to speak where I could go with that, with the whole like wanting to help part, because I've definitely been there. And I think there's a level of self-awareness that is gained by kind of asking, like, why am I trying to help right now? Like, we don't do anything for no reason. Like, there's always a benefit in every action we take. And for me, so I do this, this is like kind of off topic, but I've been doing this in my relationship where I'll ask myself this question. I'm like, am I trying to control some shit right now? And it's my way of catching myself when I feel like I'm doing something from a place of like fear or anxiety, instead of just doing something genuinely because I want to help somebody. There's this saying I really liked that I say to myself a lot, which is never treat people as a means to an end, but only treat people as an ends themselves. And what that's saying is like, am I doing this for this person, or am I using this situation with this person to do something for myself? And I feel like a lot of times in those situations when someone's like, I really want to help that person, it's like, do you want to help them for their benefit, or do you want to help them so you'll feel better? Because there's nothing like wrong or demonic about that, but at the same time, it's kind of like, if you're doing this for yourself, just like go eat a donut or something.
Social acceptance is big, and knowing how to accept yourself in a social environment, that's big.
Yeah.
May I at some point in time? I can go after Lou if it's cool.
The thought did come back. I'll make it short. So I was thinking back to Luis's question of how to make the conversation a little bit more progressive. I was thinking, in that sense, that person's perspective is probably just their world. Like, say, a young person, they've only been alive for X amount of years and you're older than them for another amount of years. Then their world is just probably limited in that sense. So it's kind of like the conversation that you will probably be better in having is to try and broaden both of your worlds, so that when different situations that are similar that come up for that person, they'll be like, I remember that conversation with Luis and he told me to think it this way. Okay, this situation is going to be better going forwards like this. So I think what my point is to kind of try and share perspectives to people in situations like that, so that when they do encounter something similar in the future, then they can pass on that progressiveness.
And if you're a facilitator, make sure you try to make it inclusive for others.
Can I just, sorry, Darryl, just because of the point Lou made about the perception, I think one thing to just be mindful of if you are keeping the perception in mind is that they may also have something in their knowledge that you don't. So it goes both ways. You may see something that they don't, but also they may be seeing something you don't. And I think that leads to the point of, as Brian was also saying, is before you react to the situation, also taking a pause quickly, a step back to ask yourself why you're doing that. Why are you going into this? Is it for yourself? Is it because you're noticing something maybe they aren't? And just being open that you may give them something that's useful, they may not take it on. It may still offend them no matter how you approach it, but also going with that question, as Lou said, does open that space for them to also meet you at maybe a point that maybe you can both conversate with, rather than going straight with, here's some advice.
I see you having trouble. Would you like some help with that move? Yes or no?
Yeah.
If they say no, then leave.
even
On to the next spot.
help.
Yeah.
Let's go. We're moving to the next spot.
Yeah. All right, let's
go for it, Darryl.
I want to hear Darryl really quick. I want to hear Darryl and Dan, and then I want to get to one of these other big questions in the chat box. But yeah, so let's hear it.
Well, first, Georgia, it's not okay that I was hurt by the interruption. I'm playing.
Sorry, Darryl. Sorry.
No,
He did let you go last. Just so.
He did. Yeah, that was payback.
Yeah, it's payback.
I mean, but that was I was doing that like as like a save the best for last kind of thing. That was like
yeah, I'm doing it too. Look.
Oh, damn. I didn't realize. Oh, damn. It's okay. It's not all right though. I'm never gonna forget. So for me, I expressed this yesterday actually. Just not I didn't express this point, but I shared that I've been a coach almost as long as I've been doing the sport. I've been teaching for 14 of the 16 years I've been practicing. I got like I started. It was funny that Marlon said that he started coaching at a place called 5 Stars Gymnastics. I started coaching at a place called 4 Stars Gymnastics, so I guess he's better. But yeah, they had the top tier, 1 more star. When I started coaching like super early, I mean, and like when I say super early, I had just turned 14, I think. So I was coaching under the table. You know what I mean? Because you don't get a work permit out here until you're 15.
16.
Yeah. So you can work like legally when you're 16, but like until then, you have to get a work permit. You can't get one until you're 15. It's some weird rule. You can't earn money as a minor. But I got into coaching super early, and super early in my own maturing, I guess. And there was an older coach there. He wasn't that much older. He was like 22, and he would teach me a lot of things. He would just I would say something that was absolutely wrong to say, thinking I'm just making a joke. I think I'm just making a joke or something. He'd be like, dude, this is why you can't say these things. And I'd be like, okay, I never took it as an offensive thing. I always looked to him as a superior, and as somebody who had more knowledge than me in that space specifically, because I was hired essentially because they wanted to start a parkour program but didn't have anybody that knew parkour, and he knew what parkour was, but he was a tumbler, so he didn't do parkour, but I did parkour. So when I came in, my job was essentially teach him parkour, and then he would teach the class, which turned into me teaching the class. And what he did for me a lot was he gave me an understanding of how to like interact in a professional space, especially in relation to teaching. So I grew up in parkour without a teacher. My teacher was the internet. I never got any classes. I never had a coach teach me anything. At jams, nobody was teaching. Nobody was like really helping. It was more like a let you be on your own and do your own thing, and I'm going to do my own thing kind of situation. Which is actually what turned me off to jams, because I thought I would go there and meet people that were better than me, and they would like share advice or even be willing to, if I asked for help, like they'd be willing to give it to me. So seeing as I never experienced that, I started to experience that after years of professional practice. And that who I experienced that from was actually Renee Scavington, the founder of Origins Parkour. He was like the first person to ever give me any real advice. And I immediately clung to that. And I became this annoying kid that would just ask him questions all the time, even though.
Shout out to Rez.
Yeah, shout out to Rez. In his mind, I was far beyond his personal like capacity, but in my mind, this dude's a professor. You know what I mean? So I've always looked at it from that standpoint. And what I've learned over all these years of coaching, especially when reaching out to female practitioners, is I need to ask for like permission. You know what I mean? If they want any advice, and the only reason why I want to help is because I've been guilty as fuck of being sexist in this sport. I know for a fact. I remember things I've fucking said. I remember instances with like female practitioner friends of mine in the sport. Nothing horrendous, but enough to know like to look back on it and be like, God damn it, why the fuck did you? You know what I mean? So I have that experience, but I also have the experience of always wanting to see women ascend in the sport to the level where people can't say the things to them. Like I'm sure it exists. I never experienced it when I was coaching gymnastics. I never experienced any of the boys ridiculing the girls in the sport, because in so many cases the girls were leagues ahead of them. I mean, and there were a lot more of them in the gym in particular than there were boys in the gym, which I think is one of the reasons why they were so much more experienced in a lot of the activities in the gymnastic space that I was in particular. So it wasn't really like you can't look at Nadia and say, as Andrew, that Nadia isn't, you know, a phenomenal athlete. But that was something that I experienced here in parkour. I saw that happening. So that almost like lit a fire in me to want to be helpful, but not like, I don't want to overstep. So there's often times where I won't ask, because if I know the person, like everybody here knows Christine Dietrich, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Christine is a very good friend of mine.
Dean.
Yeah, Christine's a very good friend of mine. And there have been times where I don't want to just like jump in and ask her if she wants any sort of help on something that I think I can give some assistance to, because I know her and I don't want to ruin it for her, because I know her personal journey and stuff. So I actually have conversations with my girlfriend Mel, who is a close personal friend of Christine as well, and I ask her, like, how do you think I should approach Christine about this? Because there's a completely different aspect to like speaking to somebody who you don't have a formal history of teaching, and speaking to somebody who you do have a formal history of teaching. Like with my female students, it's a bit different. You know, I ask them if I can give them some assistance or if I can help them at all. But the first thing I ask before that is if they allow me to be a part of their process at all. I start to ask them, well, what do you think you're doing? Like, what is your experience here? What have you gathered? What information have you gathered about your own practice as to maybe why this isn't working? And then you and I can go back and forth, and I can hopefully help lead you to understanding at least what I'm seeing, and hopefully that will open a door for you. So I've never gotten any like really big pushback from any of the females that I've taught. Typically they are very willing to learn, and even Christine has been like asked for training at times. But like I still don't want to lose just because the ones that I've taught haven't expressed any level of discomfort or you know, pause to me inquiring about helping them learn. I don't want to assume, you know, that okay, well, nobody should you know, respond to me that way, so I'll just stop asking if they want advice and just start giving them advice, you know what I mean? So I just try to keep it about you know, do I have your permission? Is this something that you would be interested in? Because I've been watching, and Dan knows this. Nobody else here knows this. I'm gonna let you guys know eventually. But we added a new female athlete to Squadron, and I recently, only because I saw in one of her posts that she was like, my climb ups are there's still hope for my climb ups, and I have a full program on climb ups. So I was like, hey, I saw this. I just wanted to let you know, if you ever need any help with anything like this in particular, like just reach out. I got mad I like started just telling her all this stuff, and immediately she sent me videos of her climb up and her dyno and all that stuff, and she's like, can you tell me? And I was like, that's all it took. That's all I was waiting for. I should have.
Well, the more you do that, the more you create the platform for them to come to you. That's the space I'm in right now, where I'm having athlete females will come to me and ask for help for their movement. And I love that space, because they were actually going to the pros or the guys and they weren't getting the help they were asking for. Some guys don't want to help girls advance in parkour with their movement because they don't feel parkour is for girls. So what do you do?
Can I
it's complete bullshit. But they're entitled to their opinion. So having, like Darryl is saying, being confident enough to see the difference and then offering it does create that community. And I think it answers Louis' question in that way, that how do we do it is by being confident enough and continue to facilitate.
Yeah. Being mindful of time, I want to try to get to two more of the questions in the Q&A that have been there for a while. If everyone's here with going over, I don't mind going over till about 11:45, because that way we can kind of get everything in there. Cool. So
keep in mind, we have some videos to feature. So if we go 15 minutes over, it'll bring it across the intermission a bit, but I can also just drop a link for anybody who'd like to watch that, whichever way you guys want to go.
Yeah, because we have some videos that people submitted for the event, which I meant to mention much earlier, so I apologize for that.
Yeah, in some cases, using the link might be better. The frame rate doesn't work spectacularly for everyone via Zoom.
Okay. Well, but yeah, so I wanted to get to this question. It's kind of a big one. It's another paragraph.
I'm sorry, Brian. Is it cool if I just hop in one more thing? I'm so sorry. I'm just like, I'm like on the edge of my seat. No, because I saw so many people, even Lou in the chat, you pointed out consent. And I think that, Louise, to answer your question, I think what it comes down to most times is consent, and also a need to be, I think that as a man, I have a social responsibility to be aware of the predicament that women are in society. And women currently and historically have existed in a society that has stripped them of agency. So as a man, when I come into a space that a woman is occupying and I strip her of her agency, say by offering unsolicited advice, that is it's reminiscent of the systems that are at play outside of where she is currently. So I think that we have a responsibility to be aware of those things when we're moving through those spaces, and consent is like a super powerful tool for accessing that.
Well said.
Thank you.
So this question, it's kind of a big one. And I would actually love to hear, so it's a question about like the homosexual space in parkour, and I would actually love to hear straight opinions on this. So it says, struggling to find the words for this question, but Brian, Howard, or any others who may have experienced similar experiences, how have you reacted to homophobia in the parkour community? Within my local community, jumps that people find difficult or spots that aren't filled with potential are always called gay, and I've never known how to call it out. When I do, it's brushed aside, and the same thing happens again next session. My sexuality is not something I feel I need to share with my community, but their non-acceptance of it makes it hard for me to feel myself with them. Like I said, struggling to find the words, but hope this gives a fair framing of the question.
Howard or Brian, I guess. For me, again, Atlanta was I learned a lot there with the idea of being homosexual. Coming from a Jamaican background, you don't even use the word gay. You know, if you're a Batiman or anything like that, people would want to fight you. You don't even use any terms like that. You don't even hug in certain ways that look funny. You use a funny man way out of it. You can't do those things. So when people would come, or we would be in an environment or someone is obviously who they want to be, and I'm the Jamaican guy, there were people in two different spaces of generations, you know, where they're like, isn't this wrong? How are you letting him train with us? Or, man, I really love that you're so open about this and it's not even an issue. So then why is it an issue? The biggest way I've found to deal with it was that say, hey, if you don't feel like that person's hurting you, let them train. And if you can't come by to train, I'm sad to hear that, but let's find a way to train together on another environment in another time. I'd mentioned that I'll go to their city versus having them come to my city or come into the environment that they didn't feel comfortable training around that person. And then sometimes it was literally, they didn't know how to deal with it because their family or their culture told them it was wrong. And so they felt like they were being forced to condition in a way that they didn't want to, when all they wanted to do was come out and jump. And so I became a medium ground for them, at least in support, that they could be comfortable to say they don't like it or have a visceral response or don't know how to respond, and then be honest enough to say, well, I'm just ignorant. You know, I'm just uncomfortable with something, or I might be gay and it feels weird to see other gay guys around you. Okay, find your space and grow.
I think I have a few things to say about that.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I love everything you said. I mean, to the question, it's really tricky. It's very tricky because on one side, it's like, what's the intention?
Yeah. Like,
does this person think like, this male wall has a relationship with another male wall, and I don't like that? It's probably not that. It's probably not.
He touched it. I don't know if I can touch that wall. Yeah.
So on one side, I'm like, intention, as this person, you know, did people grow up in an environment where that's just the language that they used? I'm not saying that's okay. I'm not excusing it. It explains it. It doesn't excuse it. Because the thing is, words are powerful and words hurt. Things like that are definitely reasons that I waited so long to be more open about my sexuality within the parkour community, because those things were so thrown across that I'm just like, will that person still be my friend after this whole, like, if they know who I really am? And it's not even like and it's not even like I hope they like me. It's more of a like, losing respect for people sucks. Like that's like that's a shitty feeling of like, oh, I don't respect you anymore. Damn it.
Right.
But I think another weird part of it is it's like, so moving past that, like what the person said in the question was like, oh, but I'm trying to say something and they're not backing down. So that's when I think it comes down to respect, like what Lou was saying, is it's like, hey, that's disrespectful to me. You know, I'm trying, like, when you're trying to be like that, I don't know, there's a vulnerability to being like, hey, like that sucks. Like when you do that, it makes you feel like shit, or it makes you feel like you don't respect me. I think where a lot of it comes from, and this might sound like a bit of a tangent, but I know it's something I genuinely feel is like, I don't think most straight people know what being gay is. like they don't. They like think it's this whole thing, and you're like, nah, man. Like it's pretty simple. Like it's pretty chill. And this might also sound like a tangent, but I think it also goes back to this whole thing of like, when I see homophobic behavior, what I see is a mirror of how that person treats the sex that they're attracted to. So when I see someone that's like, oh, that's gay, get away from me, I'm like, how do you treat women that you're attracted to?
Right.
Because if you're afraid of someone being attracted to you, I don't think that says well on how you believe sharing love.
Perceive women. Fuck.
Yeah. And almost on a comedic, like, I don't know, like I could go so many different directions with this, but it's tough because it sucks. It is hurtful.
You know what it's almost like?
I think I'll just say this. I think it creates an opportunity for dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like, this is hard to say because I don't want to be like, you should do this or like, this is better. But in my personal experience, like anger will only get so far, but like being able to turn that anger into like a vulnerable situation. So instead of just being like, no man, fuck you, but being like, hey, like I'm angry, like that bothers me, here's why, and like truly explaining your feelings in that situation. But it's difficult. So what were you gonna say, Howard?
Like you said, there's so many ways to answer it, and it always reminds me, in one analogy I used to use with the person, especially if it was a Black space, being in Atlanta, so a Black gay guy and a non-Black gay guy who's American, and then you got me in the middle of the, trying to support it. I'd say, because let's say we're all Black in that conversation, I was like, well, how did you feel when a white person tried to use the word nigga in a joke for you?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm gonna tell you. Did you just tell them no, that's unacceptable, whether it's funny or not, or whether they grew up around Black? Like, how did you respond to it? Because it may not be the same, but it's a similar experience. It's very hurtful. You understand? Somebody's trying to be themselves, and here you are socially defining them without them even getting comfortable with it. They just want to breathe. Now you got a label on them, and here it is, it becomes so difficult to try to even support yourself in that space. So to your point, Brian, it's really hard because it's layers, back to what we were saying earlier, just layers.
Yeah.
I think that's the
really
hashtag, layers.
Howard, you really just pointed to like some intersectionality there too, when you were talking about how the parallel experiences. I think that's honestly a great way to make connections when you're exploring new spaces with new people. Were you done with your thought? Because I was going to start one, but I don't want to.
The final piece on that, what I was getting at is that it's going to hurt. Like, the more we get comfortable with being uncomfortable, we mentioned that yesterday, the more it's going to keep working.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't talk about it at homes, you know, we don't sit around the dinner table talking about, so tell me about your nigga moment today, you know, or tell me about your experience today. Like, we don't do that, but we know about it. And we have deep conversations with ourselves so much about it that it's almost like there's a general conversation. I've had this with John, I've had this with Dan and Marquis. We don't know each other in the sense when we met. We never even grew up in the same space, but give us a few seconds to talking and our experience becomes so similar. It's like we grew up in the same home. You know, whether you grew up in a suburb or you grew up in the ghetto, there's this language that is, you know, that's spoken between us as Blacks. And then you have the separation of, well, I'm first generation, or I'm homosexual, or I'm not, or I'm a woman, or I'm a man, or I'm a brother, I'm a sister. The more we do it, the more we get comfortable with being uncomfortable about talking about it. That was my end piece on that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, do you want to go, Georgia?
Go on. You're still talking.
You sure? Okay. Yeah, I feel like I've had a unique experience with this question just because for a while I kind of existed as like this passive, like outside viewer of queer folks in parkour.
Same.
And I was like, you know, I kind of like separated myself because I was like, I don't know if I like fit into this, but I know that I care. And for me, dealing with, I guess, homophobia in the parkour community, honestly, I'm kind of a jokester. I like to like really highlight the homophobia, but like I'll do it in a funny way. So they'll be like, oh, don't do that, like that's gay, or like I don't do this thing because I'm not gay. And I'll just be like, congrats, you are not gay. And I'll like announce it to the whole room. I'm like, hey everyone, you know, so and so is not gay. They are straight as can be. Right. But yeah, I also, when I did come out, I immediately had access to a group of queer parkour athletes.
Parkour.
Yeah, parkour. And
I've never heard of that. That's great.
Yeah, well, it's like a new development. Shout out
that.
to Egg and Alex Paulus for putting that together. They
send me a link to that.
Yeah.
How do I sign up?
You have to be queer.
Okay, check. Yes, check.
Well, you're
cool. Yeah. Message. I think Alex Paulus and Egg are admins. So if you are like super interested, I'll drop their. Actually, yeah, we'll drop their Instagrams in there. But I like immediately had access to a community that made things safer for me. So I knew that if I know going forward that if I experience any facet of like queer phobia myself, that I like have people that I can go to kind of deconstruct that experience with me. And also I know that you are anonymous. And also, like, if you ever feel like you need someone to talk to, thank you, Gavin, for putting in Egg's Insta. If you ever feel like you do need someone to talk to, like, I'm going to put my Instagram in the chat as well. I would love for you to reach out to me.
Same here.
Yeah, because it's not fun to have to deconstruct things like that on your own.
It's a very lonely feeling, and it will drive
Same
you
here.
That's probably a good way to wrap it up for Brian and or Garrett. Leave all our contact information, and if anyone resonated with the individual or their work, just like reach out to them and say, hey, hi, you know, shit like that.
Yeah, if y'all want to throw your Instagram tags in the chat, that'd be awesome. We're at time. I wanted to ask one more thing as a closing. as a closing, because it was the last question in the Q&A, and so if we could go around and we'll just answer this question to the best of their ability. It's is there a good way to become comfortable with yourself, to not feel excluded or exclude yourself from a community? And I feel like this really tags off of the last thing that Dan said. And I'll answer that first. I think it's really, and like really combining what Dan was saying and what Howard was saying is like, it's really knowing that, and I can honestly say this, I can say this very honestly, at the end of the day, being yourself is like its own reward, and it sounds so corny, but it is so true. It is so true. Like at the end of the day, when you know who you are, there's just so much effort you don't have to exercise, and you will attract the people that are good for you when you are that person, and you will help those people by being yourself. And a lot of times that exclusion from other people is done by ourselves, by not feeling like we are good enough, or feeling like this imposter syndrome, like if people knew who we really were, they wouldn't respect me. And I'm gonna tell you right now, the first time you open yourself up and you tell people like, this is who I am, this is what I'm going through, and it could be about anything, it's gonna suck and it's gonna hurt and you're gonna cry randomly and you're gonna be like, why is this happening? Over time, nah, it's just like parkour. Like that jump the first time, impossible. That jump 100 times, oh, I didn't even notice I did it. So I just say, keep going. Like, and I want to leave it on a note. Straight dudes, tell your straight friends how handsome they are, because that
Give
needs
them
to,
hugs.
that
Yeah,
needs to
give them
happen more often.
affirmations. Platonic physical touch is like prime. It's like premium. We need to make this more normal. Like I want to hug my guy friends without it being weird.
Mad hugs. Mad hugs.
For real.
If they're COVID free.
Don't touch my hair.
Content on would be even cooler if straight people would educate other straight people not to be homophobic.
Thank you, Luis.
As Katinka said, this is really good. I'm afraid of being homophobic a lot of times, and I cringe myself to the past for things I said. Because, oh my, why did I even do that? And I realized how we masculinize being good at sports. Like being good on parkour is like you're such a strong boy. If a girl is really good in parkour, it's like you move like a boy. And is she a lesbian? Is she that good? And like,
right.
I think that I did this myself before in the past, and I want this to change. So I'm really happy to know that there is like a gay community in the parkour getting together. It's like we need that, man. And it's so cool that we are here talking about it now. Come on, 2021. Really super good.
I'm sure they heard us. I'm sure they heard us.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I had a question off of what Katinka said as well, of why don't straight people teach other straight people to not be gay, to not be homophobic, sorry. And so I can't counter it there. Actually, no, that does tie into it though, because I have this, I tried to talk about it with, I won't say who my family member is, but I did try to talk with a family member who's a male about it, because I think it was gay pride or something happening, and it brought up the conversation in the house, and it led to really, I would say, a very violent conversation of, it was almost like to accept that there are people who, you know, are attracted to those of same sex and so on, is almost like a violation to them. It was almost like he refused to accept, and worse yet, had an definitely fear of imagining that his own son, if his son came out to him saying, hey dad, I'm gay, there was such a huge fear with it that he went straight to being angry, and it became a really bad argument. And for myself, I'm still learning about, I can't deny that I still have a lot to understand about it, and that I can never put myself in the place of others. So I found it very difficult to also try to talk to him about it and why he was so angry. So I want to ask as well for you guys in the panel, whichever you identify with, have you ever tried to talk to someone who is homophobic or has those fears, and kind of what did you find helped or so on in trying to start that conversation?
I think it comes down to like societally, we have a huge shame around sex, around the
Yeah.
act of sex, like around our own genitals and around the act of sex, even though it's like the one thing that literally had to happen for all of us to be here today. And it's so strange. And to be someone who's identified by their sexuality, it's like you are like your core existence to that person is that thing that they are ashamed about in themselves. And I think that's where a lot of it comes from. And when people are like, oh, my kids can't be gay, I think where a lot of that comes from my experience, is them being like once again, how they treat women in the bedroom isn't very great. And so when they're imagining their son being treated like that, they're like, but it's like, so I think it's really just this reprogramming of how we view like eroticism and sex.
We live in such a dominant male society. If you think about it, everywhere you look and hear, there's always a male voice in everything. Like imagine how it feels for women that everywhere they look, there's masculinity. Like in everything, this table, this chair, nothing seems to be even favored in their body's benefit, much less their mind, you know? And so it does speak to, again, I grew up in such a lovely home in both ways, that even to that conversation that George is talking about, we'd fight. We'd fight if someone be like, yo, so you okay with somebody being gay? Yeah. So you gay? No, I'm not. I'm just okay with it. Why are you okay with it? So it almost thinks it's like, even if you don't know how to respond and or accept other people for being who they are, you too could be attacked for accepting. You know, so it's very difficult. It's very difficult. And I guess to answer your question in a direct way, you did the best thing. Just try to have the conversation with this individual, this person that you love, because you are coming from a loving space, and hopefully they get better. You could just hope. You can't live for them. And the more you kind of live for yourself, you're still growing into the conversation. And all of us are still growing into what the she, him, is, us, we're still growing in it.
I just wanted to say on that as well is the person needs to be ready for change to have the change. The readiness is very important in conversations like this. And I realize I never said, I identify as non-binary and pansexual, but I feel like even those words, they don't really touch my full self. So I think the whole thing about labels is also some magic letters just strung together. But yeah, I think just wanted to say the readiness to change, or the readiness to actually listen, is also very important, because you can talk to someone and they can never listen. And there's some like deep whatchamacallit, you feel powerless when you have someone like that in front of you. And I think for that question, I forgot who asked it, you also need to be safe. So like important conversations like coming out, I had like a safety sort of like plan. It's like, okay, if they don't accept me, then I have plan B to kind of run to. I think, safety is also very important in that sense, because if the person's dismissing your sort of proclamations of, I feel hurt when you say that, I feel this when you say that, but if they keep on dismissing that, then that's you need to find somewhere to be safe from that conversation afterwards.
Have the power to separate yourself from that environment, so you can learn to accept. What's up, Dan?
Thanks, Howard. So it's funny you asked that question, Georgia, because a lot of the past year has been me kind of like working to deconstruct homophobia within my own household. Not my household, but I guess the household that I like grew up in. I was like raised in like a deeply religious family, and we were like taught that like gay people were Satan, which is why it took so long for me to come out. But one thing that I found though, is that a lot of times I feel like it's like deconstructing any parkour challenge. Repetition is so crucial to like actually like getting through to someone. And like the conversation that you had is like a great start. and you also may have to have that conversation 30 more times. And like Lou pointed to something really beautiful when they said that, you know, people are ready when they're ready. And like every conversation that we have with someone plants a seed. And that seed is something that they can access later on, even if they don't take it from you right away. And like, yeah, it's murky water. It's definitely something that like has like, you got to take it. It's like baby steps, because a lot of these ideas and notions are deeply rooted, like Brian was saying, they're deeply rooted in who we view ourselves as people. And also to answer the question about becoming comfortable with yourself, honestly, I don't know if there's like a good way to do that. I think what was really important for me was allowing myself space. And that this is something that I kind of learned during quarantine, like being locked away for so long. I learned how to create space for myself in ways that I didn't have to do before. But honestly, like, you know, whoever you are and wherever you are in your life is okay and fine. And like, you're not going anywhere. And, you know, you'll you'll get there when you get there ultimately. And also like wherever you are is safe and fine. And like, I see you, and I'm sure the people on this panel see you as well. So
Beautiful.
thanks,
Kind of
Luis.
I'll just run security.
Yeah.
Damn for president.
The attendees can't see this, but Luis just said Dan for president.
Yeah.
I want to wrap this up in about 4
Dan
minutes.
for president.
Spinning off of Dan's
Lou, I wanted to-
point in terms of was the question how to feel comfortable about yourself?
Yeah, it's like a good way to become comfortable with yourself.
Yeah, I want to kind of circle back to yesterday. Was it Brian that said, or collectively, to be uncomfortable? Quite counterintuitive in terms of that question, but there are going to be points in your life where you won't be comfortable. But I think that's kind of like that shifting point of something is telling me about myself to learn this little new thing, or not so new thing, but I haven't really addressed that for a while. So I think it's the ability to be brave in that, facing that uncertainty, whatever it is, and then to kind of learn the different parts of yourself, and be like, okay, which part of me is activating right now, and what can I learn from this? So I think a little bit of kind of, whatchamacallit, reverse mechanism. Yeah, like to be uncomfortable to arrive at more comfortability, kind of.
Yeah.
I used to tell my friends that I like to wear colorful socks, because if my socks are horrible, nothing else is gonna make me uncomfortable. You know? It helps. I was completely out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, that's good.
But I love the thing that Dan said about giving space to yourself. I think that self-empathy is the key to be comfortable to yourself. If you feel uncomfortable, just listen to what you're feeling and what needs that need to be met until you are very comfortable with yourself. So yes, give space to yourself is really good. Listen to your guts, not the heart. Heart is tricky.
And breathe.
And breathe.
Breathe.
And breathe.
And meditate often.
Yes.
Brian, can I be the fastest?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thanks for letting me know that. I'm from an on-site type of neighborhood, and like there's a few people here that understand what it means, like when I say on-site. But like I think I can't speak to how to exactly make yourself feel comfortable in this community, aside from like, you know, just believing in your heart at least that either you're on your journey to find out who you are, or you know who you are and you want to be that person, unbridled and in full expression as much as possible. But on the side of somebody like myself, who I would say, like, being from an on-site type of neighborhood, if there's an issue, it's on site, which means if there's an issue between like me and somebody else for them having a problem with my beliefs or how I conduct myself, then it's on site, as in I'm going to confront that issue right then and there in whatever manner that requires. So if it's physical, it's physical, and I'll put my hands up. And if it's something of a conversation, I can have a conversation. I got words for days. So what I mean when I say that it's on site, I'm not telling everybody who is trying to find their comfort with themselves in this space to just be ready to put your hands up. What I am saying is, as somebody who is ready to do that, I will act as defense for you at any point in time, whether it be like in the internet space to just share like, hey, I advocate for this person, and if you have a problem with this person, you have a problem with me. Just to give you a little bit more comfort so that you can feel like you can be yourself. And I think you should reach out to find as many people like that as possible that are within the community, and express to them what you're feeling or what you're going through or what your experiences have been, and hopefully those people will advocate for you in some way, or help come to your defense in some way, so that you can just be you. That's why I try to make myself seen as a person like that in this sport, so that if anybody does, which I do get a lot of messages of people sharing with me issues that they've experienced, that's why that shit's on my story all the time. And I'm sure it's annoying to a lot of people, but fuck that.
Keep doing you, homie.
I don't, dude. I have never, and I apologize if this is getting too vulgar, but I have never given a single fuck, like not one, even slightly. If you got a problem with me defending somebody who's just trying to be themselves, and themselves isn't hurting nobody, like, that's a problem for me. So like, I'll come out full on like paragraph and tear your life apart, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, moral of the story is call Darryl if you need to slap your local racist.
Virtually make it on site for somebody.
Darryl, I need you here ASAP.
Like,
We need
man,
that
I wish you
virtual on site.
would. No, for real, call me. I'm in the car. I'll be there. I got, man.
You know who his dad is?
I hear a new business starting.
Yeah, so I'm gonna order a t-shirt, and you're gonna come with the t-shirt, right?
We're gonna be there.
We're gonna come in the t-shirt.
We just show up.
We got Darryl and Darryl's dad. We got Darryl and Darryl's dad.
Okay.
Squadron gotta make police attire gear. Just wear the shirts.
I gotta wrap this up, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Sorry, Brian, I didn't add a. Is it okay if I add one point? I'm really sorry. I know I didn't say anything to this question.
No,
I'll make it super quick, even quicker than Darryl. I'm quicker than Darryl.
Marquis,
so quick.
Can't keep it now.
Marquis, what do you think? Like, you have to plug anything, or
just wrapping up? My own point was, along with the space, one thing that I found really helped to at least keep in mind in the search for looking for that comfortable space is also give yourself time. I think when it comes to, I don't know how certain people react to situations or problems. For instance, Darryl, he's ready. Whereas some, we may also seek flight. It's okay to have that balance that sometimes a problem needs to be, or a situation needs you to act now, but sometimes it also takes time to just be in the situation, take it away with you and learn from it later. There's always time for you to get to know yourself. And as Lou, I think, made a point as well, you may not be the same person as you was yesterday. Just like with the jump, you may have done it another day. It was great. You had a good time. You felt good. You come back to it a few weeks later and it terrifies you. I think one of the main things is that idea that life is uncomfortable as well as it can be beautiful. There's lots of different struggles that will happen. No matter how much you learn, there's always something you can continue to learn. So just giving yourself that time and that space that whatever's happening with you, try to be in it as much as you can, whether that's taking a step back or acting then. Take it away with you. Use that space to also talk to yourself. One of the main things that maybe some people say it's crazy to talk to yourself, but talking to yourself is getting to be with just yourself. And another thing is, as much as it is about yourself, people can be really important in your journey. So surrounding yourself, trying to meet with other people who care about you, who do champion both your vulnerabilities and your strengths and are there for you, and you can be there for them, can make a huge difference. I wouldn't be talking in the way I would now or have people like Lou that I can talk to if it wasn't for the effort that my team put into me as well. So part of me getting to be comfortable with my skin has been because of being around people who also cared enough to nurture that. So I think that's really important, is to find those people as well who can be care for you. Maybe it's taking one step of talking to one person and opening up to them and sharing with them. Then maybe a next step is to find someone else. It doesn't have to be a big thing at once. It may be a lot of little steps. So yeah, that was mine. Thank you, Brian.
I gotta piggyback off that because I was. I'm sorry. Whatever. We're fine.
I was faster.
I'm in charge. I say when we end. As in we can keep going. We don't have to stop. But the just like on that note of time, I would feel very like inauthentic if I did not share this. Like, yeah, I did not begin to like truthfully question and accept my sexuality till like 2017. I did not have my first loving experience, sexual encounter, whatever you want to call it, until late like November 2018. I did not tell friends until late 2019. I did not post anything about it on social media until about 3 or 4 months ago.
Jeez.
Like, take your time. There's no rush. You don't have to prove shit to anybody. And the people that matter are gonna they're gonna be there for you.
And you are valid. So valid.
Yeah.
Totally. And what's that thing? People who mind don't matter, and people who matter don't mind.
Dang, I never heard that, but I love it. Yeah, cool. Does anybody have anything else they want to say to be complete on this?
I do.
Thank
you.
Brown t-shirts now, 20% off.
Yeah, come with the t-shirt. Come with the t-shirt.
Yes. We need to make a hashtag generation out of this conversation. I was actually thinking, Marlon had mentioned it yesterday, just because it's another new platform that gives us the opportunity to still continue conversation. What's it called again?
House party? Is that
what's
that?
that?
Clubhouse. No.
Clubhouse.
Right.
Clubhouse. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I have an
Clubhouse.
account too.
Clubhouse.
Right. And create a Clubhouse account and call it like OG after conversation or after dark or something. And it's just you just drop in good you just drop in conversations and everything like that, because this thing continues. And if it comes back again annually, or if we find another way, let's say Squadron opens up something, or Parkour's Black Equity open up something to continue to facilitate conversations like this. This is the growth. This is why we all showed up so well, because we needed it and we continue to need it. So I think to Marlon's point, and maybe anybody else was thinking about it, taking some intentional initiative to form like an old school forum and just start dumping in there and build and grow in that way.
Yeah, and on that point, I think I want to take my mentor Yao's advice is, whoever's listening, go tell someone about this conversation so that you spread it to someone. Like, I don't know, preferably someone, not your pet. But maybe your pet, I don't know. But just, talk to someone about what you've heard today.
Yes.
The last thing I was going to say before we wrap up, or before we wrap up, before I stop talking. Before I
That's
stop
probably
talking.
a new hashtag.
Yeah, before I stop talking. I coming out.
1,000.
Oh man. Okay. It took 21 years for me to even realize that I was attracted to men. I guess 20 years, but I think Brian pointed out something really beautiful when he mentioned that, you know, he had other people that developed that experience for and with him. And I've been really lucky to have people in my life that were able to pour into me and really like create space that I didn't know existed for me. So there is like, yeah, we talk about the self a lot, but there is something really beautiful about being able to allow others to create space for you and to fill that space and do it like without any reservations, because that's where like a lot of magic happens. And if you don't have that, if anyone doesn't have that, like, please talk to me, because I love facilitating that. And yeah, I don't know. That's all.
Nice. Yeah, wow. So thank you everybody for showing up. This is fantastic. I feel selfish because this did more for me personally than anybody here could ever imagine. So thank you. We have the next talk coming up at 12:30 in about 35 minutes about the non-American experience. I'm really excited about that. We're basically going to compare like how many of these like racial things in parkour are American, how many of them aren't, who knows, we'll find out. In between that, we have, we're gonna have an intermission, but we also have some videos that people submitted as a part of our like film festival for the Obsidian Gathering. I'm gonna throw it to Marquis to talk about that, to give us the details on that information.
Yeah, guys, we've got, I believe it's 6 videos. We've got a couple panelists. We've got Georgia, we've got Dan, we've got Howard, we've got videos. We also have some attendees. We've got Rashid, who's been really active in the chat, Mr. Julius Porter, as well as Shaw, who I don't think got to make it today, but he's got a little featurette from New York. There may be some frame rate issues, so I am going to drop the link for the video in the chat. We found that the audio was working, but for some people that rate might just not be worth looking at. So I wanted to give you the heads up on that.
And we can also post, sorry, keep going.
Oh, it's all right. And then I'm also going to be in the chat on my phone, since I can't see the chat while the videos are playing, in case really it's just not working for anybody. You know, experimenting first event thing. So thank you so much, everybody, for bearing with us. And thank you so much for giving us some videos to show off.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much for showing up for this talk. Please show up for the next one, and also donate if you have not donated already, which I think everyone here has, because you had to donate to get into the event. But we've raised a bunch of money so far, and I'm excited to see how much we raise by the end. And it's all going to go back into the event. When we were organizing this with PKV, they asked me, they're like, do you want to get paid for this? And I was like, no, because if I get paid, I want everyone to get paid. And I don't know how that's going to work. And I want the money to go into the event. And so my dream is to be able to do this with all of you in person when we can do that again. So that's what this is building towards. So yeah, thank you. Great. Marquis, do we close up the chat at this point, or do we leave it open, or close up the?
Oh yeah, I'm about to go to sharing the screen now. Anybody who would like to stick around, thank you so much. Otherwise, the link is in the chat if you'd like to watch it later.
Cool. Thank you all so much for having such a great talk, and thank you for showing up.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for being here, guys.